Now, I could not be more delighted than I am today to introduce you to our distinguished alumna for 2014, Nancy Lieberman, a member of the class of 1979. Nancy Lieberman is one of the most inspiring people I know. She graduated from the law school in 1979, as I mentioned. She then went to work at the White House during the Ford administration before joining the prestigious New York firm, actually national firm, Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom. Nancy is still with the firm today as a senior partner, well respected within the legal and business industries. She is the youngest person ever to make partner at Skadden in just under 6 years of being hired. She was only 30 years old. Nancy's work focuses on merger and acquisition transactions involving public and private companies. She works on negotiated and contested acquisitions, private equity transactions, tender offers, recapitalizations, and restructuring. She advises corporations on various corporate governance issues and has extensive experience structuring international and U.S. joint ventures, a subject that she has lectured on over the years. Now, Nancy has a style that is quite distinctive. I think you could say, and I think you're going to hear, she blends the analytical sharpness and no-nonsense approach of a Chicago alumna with all of the toughness and brashness of a New Yorker. Nancy sets a spectacular example for all of our newly minted graduates. During her exceptional career, she has also had a deep interest in service to the community. As many of you know, several years ago, Nancy was injured in a ski accident, which took away most of her mobility. In true Nancy fashion, that has not held her back. In fact, it has strengthened her and encouraged her to be even more tenacious than in her work and in her passions. Indeed, in April of 2013, Nancy was named a Deal Maker of the Year by the American Lawyer magazine. Nancy is also devoted to charitable and civic affairs. She and her friends and family established the Friends of Nancy Lieberman Fund to support spinal cord injury research at the University of Rochester Medical Center. She is co-founder and director of New Yorkers to Cure Paralysis. She's also director of the Pacific Council on International Policy and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And she's a trustee of the University of Rochester. In addition to being a successful attorney and civic leader, Nancy has also been an active and engaged alumna of the law school. She served on the law school visiting committee 4 times and also was on the law school centennial campaign committee. She's very active in New York with our alumni group there and has hosted a number of activities at Skadden and at her home. And so I am extremely honored and excited today to introduce my dear friend and the recipient of the Distinguished Alumna Award of 2014, Nancy Lieberman.
Graduates, parents and loved ones, Dean Schill, members of the law school faculty who are behind me, and honored guests. Before I begin this commencement address, I want to reflect on the loss we've all suffered due to the passing of Laura LaPlante and the injuries suffered by your classmate, Michael Wassel, due to a drunk driver. I would ask each graduate to do an act of public service this coming year, specifically in Laura's memory, and also to be there to help Michael recover from the injuries he has sustained. It was the overwhelming help and love of my family, friends, and colleagues at work that gave me the strength and the will to surmount my injuries, and therefore to be here today. And I truly hope that you all will do the same for Michael. It really makes a big difference. Now, being asked to give this commencement address is truly the greatest honor ever bestowed upon me, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today to share this joyous occasion with the class of 2014, their family and friends, and of course, the wonderful faculty of the law school sitting behind me. First, I would like to speak directly to our graduates. No one just ends up at the University of Chicago Law School by accident. It takes an incredible amount of discipline and hard work to be admitted as students. So, if ever there were a time for you to luxuriate, today is that day. You've persevered. You've persevered, you've endured, and you've triumphed through 3 years of Socratic teaching, and you've come out on the other end wiser, more competent, and ready to take on the world and make it a better place. And believe me, you will do just that. Now, as a first-year law student, I had a very difficult time dealing with the Socratic method of teaching. I could not understand how my terrific professors would speak English words, yet it was Greek to me. As a matter of fact, in my very first torts class with Professor Richard Epstein, and I know many of you have taken courses with Professor Epstein, during the very first week of law school, I remember that he asked dozens of students what a tort was, and no one seemed to have an answer that would satisfy him. I was mortified when he said to me in his wonderful voice, "Miss Lieberman, what is a tort?" I had no idea, and I simply froze and I blurted out, "Well, it depends. A strawberry tort or an apple tort?" While the rest of the class burst out in laughter, Professor Epstein just stared at me. It seemed as though he was glowering at me, and it seemed to go on for 10 minutes, but probably was just 5 seconds. The bookend to this story also involved Professor Epstein, but this time it was near the end of my 3rd year in the law school, in a corporate tax class. By this time, I had absorbed what Chicago had to offer me, and I was firing on all cylinders when Professor Epstein grilled me with questions regarding a tax case called Waterman Steamship. Some of you may have studied that case. He kept asking me questions, and I kept answering them. Finally, he walked up to where I was sitting, handed me the chalk, and said in his wonderful voice, "Miss Lieberman, here, you know so much about this subject. Why don't you teach the rest of the class?" Well, it took me a while to figure out that Socratic teaching was perhaps the greatest gift the law school ever gave me, because it forced me to spot the issues and think on my feet, which are essential elements for success no matter what you do after law school. Often I explain this phenomenon as analogous to a buzzer going off in the back of my head, and this signal causes me to automatically question and critically think about what I'm dealing with at the moment. It is as though I possess a special power which enables me to dissect issues and solve problems. Now, I'll bet that you thought lawyers like me just dropped from the sky, fully formed. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rather, Chicago formed me, and you will grow to recognize over the years that it also shaped you. But for now, as our latest graduates, it is both party time and parting time, which means going into the real world and leaving the cocoon of the law school. At this moment, You must think and feel that this is your day, your celebration, your chance to savor the moment and remember it for the rest of your lives. I believe that few of our graduates would be here today receiving their degrees were it not for their family and friends in the audience who encouraged them to reach for the sky academically and intellectually. And by that I mean urging today's graduates to study hard, stay focused, and remain curious about the world we live in. Family and friends have also provided our graduates with a comforting phone call or visit when college or law school seemed just too tough to endure. And so, family members and friends here today, you too deserve a very special acknowledgement because you provided the special ingredients of compassion and love which enabled the class of 2014 to flourish as they have done. Now, I'd like to talk to you about what I call the white elephant standing before you in this magnificent Rockefeller chapel. Of course, I'm speaking about the wheelchair that I'm sitting in, and as the dean mentioned, I'm a quadriplegic, and this happened to me 6.5 years ago on Christmas Eve day when I had a freak skiing accident and broke my neck. It happened in an instant, but may stay with me for the rest of my life. Truly, it's a weird condition to be in because you lose your independence, but you still have your brain power intact. Your mind says one thing, but virtually the rest of your body does something else. People often tell me that I'm courageous, inspirational, brave, heroic, and any other accolade you can imagine. But what they're really saying is, if this happened to me, I could not go on, and I'm amazed that you're able to do so. After hearing this several times, I thought to myself, well, I could either whine or drink wine, and I decided I'd rather celebrate life and drink the wine. When I was in the first stage of my recovery, I was visited from time to time by others who had had accidents that left them paralyzed. They had retired from their jobs, and they rarely traveled away from their homes. Such visitors absolutely depressed and scared me to death. But ultimately, they compelled me to do the reverse of what they were doing. There was no choice for me. I was going back to work. I was going to resume travel around the world, and I was going to get back my life, no matter what effort it took. At first blush, this was not such an easy task. I was told in the hospital that I'd get back whatever feeling was possible within the first 6 months of my accident, and after that, I just have to live with what I had and shouldn't expect any more recovery. Statistically, the numbers were not on my side. After 5 years, only 20% of paralyzed adults go back to work. My goal was to go back to my merger and acquisitions practice at Skadden Arps full-time in 1 year after my accident. And on January 19, 2009, I resumed my practice, and I was warmly welcomed back to Skadden. But being out of the swirl of legal practice for 1 year had taken its toll on my practice. Several potential clients had gone elsewhere because I was not around to work on their matters. The economy was in shambles, and clients were pulling in their horns and were working to keep above water in the Great Recession. So, if you were me, what would you do, and how would you do it? Recreating my law practice was the only option. In essence, I had to persevere and go back to basics. I started calling my old clients every few weeks with any tidbits of information that might be relevant to their businesses. Without saying so, the point was made to them that I was back on top of things and ready to work. Eventually, a new potential client was introduced to me, and I was hired by the general counsel for a significant transaction. That experience buoyed my confidence. I was back on track and have gone on to advise on some of the most complex transactions of my career. Now, there is a big message here. No matter where you are in life, you can never rest on your laurels. Whether it is a law degree from the University of Chicago Law School or being a senior partner at a major law firm like Skadden Arps, you must always be persistent and persevere and be prepared at any time to reinvent yourself, because in life, you never know what obstacles you may have to confront. Nothing must ever be taken for granted, and you must never have any expectations that anything will just be handed over to you in the real world. But you're eminently prepared because all of you are Chicago graduates with a very special skill set, and by now, I think you know what I mean. Now, while reestablishing my law practice, I became aware that New York State was reneging on its statutory obligation to allocate $8.5 million per year towards spinal cord injury research. Remarkable progress had been made, and they are actually quite close to a total cure. But this funding cutoff by New York State was like ending a marathon at the 24-mile mark, if you can imagine it. But I realized that I could make a difference given my Chicago education, perseverance, life experiences, and also, let's face it, my belief that I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Combining that attitude, along with the belief that the law was unequivocally on my side, I set out to right the wrongs being perpetuated. Along with some of my colleagues at Skadden, I learned precisely how the law was supposed to work, as opposed to the specious rationale used to justify the funding cutoff. We had drafted a complaint, and I was ready to bring the pro bono lawsuit with the backing of my firm. As the only lawyer in an advocacy group I founded this past year with 3 others, I was charged with presenting our case before numerous state legislators and their staff in Albany. Thinking on my feet, and of course, thinking on my feet metaphorically, that is, I answered all the hardball questions. Turning the tables, I also asked our government officials a series of questions to elicit answers and so that they would prove the point that dedicated funding, in their own words, was being diverted for improper uses. Sometimes I raised my voice and sometimes I lowered my voice, but never ever did I stop making my voice be heard. This should sound quite familiar to the graduates today and members of the faculty, because all I really did was employ the lessons I learned here nearly 4 decades ago, beginning with that very first torts class I experienced with Professor Epstein. This past April, we succeeded in getting restoration of $7.9 million in funding, something that was unimaginable just a few months earlier. Without question, this was more satisfying to me than the most complex merger transaction. Remember, as Chicago graduates, we get things done. I believe with all my heart that you will, in your own way, get things done, and you will leave the world a much better place than you found it. My most sincere congratulations to the class of 2014. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy.